transformed the folk world and transformed the guitar. Davy Graham had grown up in London's Notting Hill in the 1950s, a time when the city was changing and becoming more diverse.
Thousands of people are asking me how I spend my time in London City. Thousands of people are asking me how I spend my time in London City. Well, that is a question I cannot answer. I regret the day I left sweet Jamaica. I mean, you would pity my position, because I nearly died here from starvation.
In the post-war period, Britain invited citizens from its colonies in the Caribbean to come and rebuild its shattered cities. People from Jamaica, Trinidad, and beyond began to arrive and make new lives.
You lost night, the bomb the night before. No, you turn it over, want to do the rock and roll. Teach me to rock. Yeah, you better teach me to rock.
The soundtrack to this time was London's Blue Beat label. And hits like this, Boogie Rock by Laurel Aitken. Recorded in 1960, this was one of the earliest Jamaican tracks to be produced in the UK, and it helped to kickstart Britain's fascination with Jamaican music. But Blue Beat had come in the aftermath of shocking violence.
They're marking the houses, all the coloured houses around here. There's two teddy boys going around right now on motorbikes, marking the outside of the house for the boys to know where to bomb and where not to bomb.
In the summer of 1958, violent, racist white gangs roamed the streets of Notting Hill.
About 15 fellows came out the car, all with bottles, sticks, and knives. I got to run about 200 yards for help.
The West Indian community looked on in horror.
We can't go home. Our home is all surrounded by young teenagers who are hurling bottles and bricks all around Walmer Road. We can't go home.
Out of the ashes of the Notting Hill riots came something new for Britain. Carnival.
I really missing the carnival because I adore that festival. The terror is really missing the carnival because I really love that festival. I can't hear no beating of steel band. I can't see no clown, no wild Indian. Yes, I just cry when the time comes. No mass here in Great Britain.
Large West Indian celebrations in London were kicked off by Trinidadian activist Claudia Jones in the 1950s. These indoor parties were superseded by the outdoor Notting Hill Festival, started by local resident Ronnie Laslett in 1964. This would evolve into the two-day carnival that now welcomes over 2 million people every year. Here's Ronnie Laslett talking to the BBC in the 1960s.
I literally used to just stand for hours looking out at the window, the world sort of going past, kids with nowhere to play, constantly in danger from traffic. And I thought what this area needs is gaiety and colour and fun. And I was thinking about this on a Friday night, just as I was sort of going off to sleep. And suddenly, I suppose in my half sleep, I suddenly saw a procession, a festival, and people dancing in the streets. The first thing I did was rung up the police and say, well, look, I want to have a procession or a parade. Can I come and see you? And from that moment on, I started doing the Notting Hill Festival. I had, must have been about 30 or 40 children dressed as Dickens children. I had young students dressed as kings and queens. I had West Indian still bands in the street, and people were dancing. We had an 8-day festival, and it was a tremendous success.
There's not many people alive today who knew or was there when it all started, you know?
Sterling Bedingcore grew up in Trinidad. He came to play at the Festival of Britain as part of TASPO, the Trinidad All-Steel Percussion Orchestra. He's been part of the Notting Hill Carnival since the very beginning.
Most of my friends, they passed away. And, well, I'm the only one that's here to tell the story because I came here in 1951. And if you were in the West End and you take a taxi and you said you're going to Ladbroke Grove, they wouldn't take you because it was sort of notorious place. And no taxi would want to come to this area. And now it's so affluent. Now it's have so many people. All the people, the West Indian, they move out, and only the people with money is here now. Right now, we have Portobello Road and Acklam Road. That's exactly where the children's carnival started. So you can see I have my drum around my neck, and we were playing, and my friend Russell Henderson, he said, let's take a road march. And we started to walk down Portobello Road, and the kids were following behind us like the Pied Piper. And the song we were playing was Don't Stop the Carnival. That was the tune we were playing. A lot of West Indians, they never had the chance to have a sort of street parade. It was the first time that they can, in the street and doing something like what they used to do in the West Indies, like the carnival. So you can imagine people were taking off their jackets and they were just in a frenzy saying, what is a carnival in London? This is something, it reminds me of back home.
All the foreigners start to break away. Don't stop the carnival.
Next week, we explore more sounds of Black Europe at the height of the 1960s. From African guitar music in Paris to free jazz in Sweden.
Black Music in Europe, A Hidden History, was presented by Clark Peters and produced by Tom Wolfenden. It's a Loftus Media production for BBC Radio 4. Time now for the final programme in our new series, New Storytellers, which has been featuring the winners of last year's Charles Parker Prize. The prize is named after the famous radio producer who worked with Ewan MacColl and Penny Seeger on the acclaimed series of radio ballads in the 1950s and 60s. The programme is introduced by Sarah Parker.
The prize was set up in 2004 in memory of my father to encourage and celebrate the very best in student audio feature making. And now we hear the top award, the Gold Charles Parker Prize 2019, the work of Sian Medford, a student at the University of West London. In this heartwarming feature, A Young Cell in a Small Town, Sian's mother Selina takes her daughter back to her early years as part of a Jamaican family growing up in South Wales in the 1960s.
We're at Bridgend, aren't we? Oh God, and we're off to Port Talbot. I'm so excited. But there's been a slight delay, it seems like. Not to worry. We'll get there eventually. I am feeling a little bit excited, to be honest with you. Hey? Can you see I've got a spring in my shoe? I know you can't stop dancing. I know. I'll get some of them Welsh cakes down me when I get down. Right, let's head to Sweetman's now. Just need to get a couple of Welsh cakes. I think I'm going to go with the traditional currants with the... Yeah, please.
One packet?
Oh, what do you know how many's in a packet?
It's in a packet.
Oh, no, can I have... how much a packet are they?
£2 a packet.
Should I have 4? No, I'll have 2.
And can we have a chocolate one as well, please?
Oh, she wants to try a chocolate one now.
Honestly.
I've got to educate her. I named her Sian because I'm from Port Talbot. I was born in Leith. Yeah. But I've been living in Birmingham for over 40. Oh, God, see?
I know you were there.
Do you?
What's on in Port Talbot?
Yeah.
What's your name?
Selina. I was Diva.
Ah.
What's your name, Ed?
Oh, Diane.
What's your last name, Diane?
Vickery.
Oh my God!
Yeah.
Oh
you
my
brother
God!
Lloyd, yeah? Yeah, you brother Lloyd.
That's it.
Your mum said it.
Oh my God! That's your word.
Everyone knows everyone in Wales, though, don't they?
13th of April, and my mum and I are going back to her hometown, Port Albert, in South Wales. Her dad immigrated there after arriving on the Empire Windrush in the 1950s. A chance to see the good, the bad, and the ugly struggles my mum went through, and catch up with her friends and family along the way. The first stop was her eldest brother, Ishmael's house.
This is a young cell in a small town.
Uncle Ish's house, it tells a story.
It does, yeah.
I remember as like a kid, like when we used to go down to Wales, he's got this like a Victorian bath, and it's what he used to have the fish in.
Yeah.
And he's still got that, but there's no fish in it.
Mrs. Jones, coming through. Hello, how are you?
Nice to
lovely to see you.
Nice to see you.
Long time.
Coming through. Yeah, come through.
So you was what? How old would you say you were when you came?
I was 9 when I came, yeah.
It's young, isn't it? What year did you come over then?
I come over in May 1960, I came.
Mum died 64.
That's right, remember, yeah, my memory.
If you came in May 60, I was born November, December, January, February, March. I was only 6 months old.
6 months old when you was a baby, that's right. Because my gran shaved all my hair off. Right. She said, you've got to go to England. And I was the only one left in Jamaica. All my family was here. And I was left with my gran, Miss Annie.
I know.
Right. But I was also going between Miss Annie and Uncle Ralphie. And his wife.
Uncle Ralphie being Dad's brother?
Dad's brother,
Yeah,
right.
I know.
Because I used to do trios. I have to jump on Alice and she feed me. Then I will ride Alice all the way back to our house.
Alice is your donkey?
My donkey. Me and my donkey. I would never part with Alice. Alice took me everywhere. So my gran wrote to my mom and said, listen, Ishmael is suffering over here, with Ralphie. They want to do cheap labor. And my mom says, right, Reg, we got to send for Ishmael. And when I come here with all the marks I had, my mom said, if I have one of Ralphie, I'd strangle him and his wife, because he used to whip me, Ralph was a nasty man.
What do you used to whip you with? A belt or?
No, banana leaf. She said, Ishmael, you're home now. This is home now. Mickna Street, I was. Yeah. As you said, I was young.
If I remember...
We had church in that front room. Every Saturday morning was church in the front room. Yeah. The Seventh-day Adventist Church actually started 18 Mickna Street.
Obviously, you were there before. I always remember things like, what's the matter with them?
Yeah, what's the matter with them?
What's all that singing coming from the front room?
That's right, that's right. They used to all come by the window, weren't they?
And they'd be like, tap, 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 tap.
On the window, and they'd be looking, and past the further say, come in, come in, come in.
We'll convert you.
We'll convert you. We used to leave the front door open, and all kids now knows used to come to the front door, and it's this loud singing, and
Hide me, oh thou great,
guide me, oh thou great Jehovah. That was through this forest land. And my belly would be rumbling, and the worst part about it, no means cook and feed everybody else to eat. But I was a bit backwards, like, over there, because I didn't like to go to school, because it was a long walk, you know. In school in Jamaica, you had to be early, because otherwise...
You get cane.
In Jamaica, sit down. Jamaican kids are much more disciplined in school than they are in Britain. And I can say that, even now.
Yeah.
She went out and bought me a cap. Never forget it. Bought me a little cap.
Mum did?
Yeah, and I wore this cap. I treasured it everywhere I go. That's why I lost my finger. Yeah, I went to school.
Oh my God.
Blackie, oh, nigga. I took my cap and I threw it between themselves, you know, and I run after what, and then butter me out in it, and the nail come out.
Oh no.
Out there, and they broke the finger there, look.
Gee, kids at school?
Kids
at school. At the age of what, 9, 10?
9, 10, yeah. Only me and you, Nell, was the only black in school, and your sister Linda. Yeah. 3 of us was the first.
Only 3 black kids?
3 black kids was in that school. Divas and Wellingtons were the first people. They come over by ship. Most of them did. I was lucky I didn't have a banana boat. I had a bloody aeroplane. Oh.
So the final thing I want to ask you about is the Working Men's Club.
There was a sign up on the door. A guy turned around and said, "Hey, what are you doing in here?" He said, "Well, can't you read? Look, above the door. No blacks allowed."
How did that make you feel, reading that?
Terrible, terrible. He said, "Listen, you can't walk in here, then you happen to be a black man." They wouldn't remove it because it had to be done by all the club committee.
Yeah.
And half of them were nigger-yetters. So they said, "No, we keep it up there."
And that wasn't the only bar in Port Talbot to have that sign. It was one of many. A place where the divide wasn't seen was the Adventist Church, which was the next stop for my mum and me. I could never imagine having church in our Birmingham house in our front room.
Sean, I tell you, I kid you not, I used to have to play the organ, a Bon Tempi hit organ, in the front room, and I couldn't even read music, so I used to make it up. I tell you. Jenny, what? Demon? Oh my God, my cousin Jenny. What's that? What are you doing there? Oh my God.
Oh, take a photo. Oh, Selena, man.
Been a long time, innit?
Happy Saturday. We'll have a walk around.
I think the last time I remember being here is my dad's funeral. Yeah.
Remember the cross?
Yeah. I do remember.
Yeah,
yes.
the cross.
Oh,
And then
that's
you put the
always
numbers.
there. Yeah. Uncle John made it.
And yours, yeah, Uncle John. Do you remember the mix?
Oh my God. Yeah. John Bird is my uncle on my mum's side.
Yeah.
Oh my days.
And he made all this.
Oh, look at you. Oh, Mrs. Campbell. Well, where do I start? Mrs. Campbell's been around us for years now.
Life of a portal.
Yeah. We've been a family of people that have grown up together, innit?
Lydia's hiding and she's funny back, huh? It's so good to see. Oh, this is good for you, Selena, you know that. So, you see why I have to take you away from your dinner? Selena, sweeter than this.
Oh my God. And you've got tissue, look for
Oh, don't worry, you can get some bog roll quick.
It's so good to see you. I'm just wanting to give I want to kind of give up any energy that I've got. I want to pass it over to you. I can't believe it.
What a lovely Sabbath.
It was.
The best way you could have ended, isn't it? So
it started off
fantastic.
Like, you know, innit?
Yeah,
lovely.
Easy coming home, no problem. Yeah.
It was now time for my mum to catch up with her childhood friend Rian and husband Howard and talk about the good old days.
I love your home. I love the colour scheme in here. It's lovely and calming and...
You wouldn't think you're in Port Talbot, like, as soon as we got off the train, everything just looked dull.
You could not, you know when you're near Port Talbot.
Yeah, you see the smoke.
There was loads, weren't there?
Yeah.
Like, the whole sky's just grey.
Friendship is a bond that you have between two people. As kids growing up, we didn't see colour. We saw Rian and Selena. Do you know what? I had quite a lot of good friends. Rian is my long-time best friend. I used to call for Rian on the mornings going to school, and Mommy says, "Come on in and have a seat. Rian won't be long now." And I first met you, if I remember rightly, Sandfields, isn't it?
Yeah,
Sandfields School.
In France,
yeah.
We were 5 when we started in France.
There you go.
When did you go to Birmingham?
17, coming up to 18.
Yeah, it was very young, wasn't it?
It was a nice way to get away from our stepmother, wasn't it? Oh God, she was horrendous.
And she was evil.
Yeah.
I don't know anybody that knew her like that.
No.
Oh, I remember she was combing your hair.
Yeah, really rough.
The straightening things.
Oh, the hot comb.
Yeah.
Scissor.
Could see the
steam coming out. Because she wouldn't, what she didn't used to do, she wouldn't wait for her hair to dry in order to wet, so it used to burn my scalp at the same time.
How was she created? God didn't create that. Evil person she was. I hated her. She was the scared like something here. I hate going to
when she was laughing, I thought she was like growling. I used to think, oh my God, no, what is it?
And she used to scream.
Yeah.
And there was no need of it. No.
When we were talking the other day about you know, our little Red Riding Hood baskets, we used to do cookery classes. We used to love cookery classes.
You always speak to her on the phone, and you're always like, "Oh, when I come down, I want bristles."
Corned beef, potato, and you got breadcrumbs on the outside. Beautiful. absolutely beautiful.
That was fun then. We were doing that, didn't we? The boys used to wait on the bottom of the stairs, follow cooking, weren't they? Fetch out a little red riding on with a plastic cover. What a made! Sausage rolls, the time I get on, there'll be nothing like.
One of the things I should ask you, oh God, what was it like growing up in Wales? Because they're all white people in Wales. Well, predominantly, yeah.
Would you say, Ian?
Yeah.
Never seen one black person?
No.
There was no black people when I was school.
No.
I never actually met a black person until I went to comp.
Oh my God. Well, there's a handful of us.
Well, it was all the Wellingtons, all the Devils. The town was full.
I didn't see colour.
No, me, I never.
If you weren't the brightest of the bright.
Yeah, they didn't want to know, did they?
If you could know your own, they wouldn't help it.
Yeah. I mean, there were good days. But, you know, like, as I think...
Your home life wasn't so good.
Yeah.
But
and I think that reflected on me moving away from here.
Oh, you couldn't get out quick enough.
Yeah.
When I was 17, I ran away from home and from everything.
Like I said to Sean, poor Talbot will always be home.
Oh,
yeah.
We did have some fun.
If we could go back in time, but maybe miss out the stepmother a bit, maybe it'd be nice, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Laugh at me. Their children call me names. I would run.
A Young Cell in a Small Town was produced by Sean Medford and won the Gold Charles Parker Prize 2019. New Storytellers is a soundscape.
Good morning. With images of God as a bearded old man with flowing robes, more often than not we limit our thinking when it comes to God's image and creative activity. We assume that God has an image, that we, male and female, are created in it, and that's that. And as such, we limit God, and we negate the dignity and responsibility we are given by God. And we forget all too easily, especially in a time of isolation and distancing, that being created in God's image is not about any of us as individuals, but about the whole human family united by God's creative love and called out of that same love to care for one another and for our world.
O Lord my God, when I in awesome wonder consider all the worlds thy hands have made, I see the stars, I hear the rolling thunder, thy power throughout the universe displayed. Then sings my soul, my Savior God to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. When Christ shall come with shouts of acclamation and take me home, what joy shall fill my heart? Then I shall bow in humble adoration and there proclaim, my God, how great thou art. Then sings
Great God, make even this time a season of blessing for us, that in fear we may find you mighty to save, and in this most holy week we may find the cross to be none other than the way of life. Amen. The themes for the daily service and Sunday worship throughout Lent follow the Church of England's Live Lent series. A link to the resources for individuals and groups can be found on the program homepages. This includes reference to today's reading from the first chapter of Genesis, where on the sixth day of creation, God creates humankind in God's own image and tasks them with care for all that God has made.
God said, "Let us make humankind in our image, according to our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the wild animals of the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth." So God created humankind in his image. In the image of God he created them. Male and female he created them. God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful, and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves upon the earth." God said, "See, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is upon the face of the earth, and every tree with a seed in its fruit, and you shall have them for food. And to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the air, and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has a breath of life, I have given every green plant for food." And it was so. God saw everything that he had made, and indeed, it was very good.
Perhaps the most curious part of this first creation story is the oft-missed reality that when God creates humankind, God is plural. Humankind is created in our image and our likeness. God is, by nature, a social being, part of a divine community that Christians now call the Trinity. And thus, at the heart of what it means to be created in God's image is the reality that God creates us communally as social and relational beings. Our interaction and interdependence on one another, a reality made painfully clear in this time of social distancing as we work to love and protect one another, is part and parcel of our being created in God's image. God shares God's power in relationship with us, and by God we are given responsibility for one another and for all creation. Even in isolation, therefore, we cannot sit back and assume God will take care of everything. Rather, we who are made in God's image are called, however limited we might be at this time, to genuine engagement with and care for our community and our world. Such a call into God's life, strength, and love is beautifully captured in our next hymn, Vaughan Williams' The Call, sung by this year's BBC Radio 2's Young Choristers of the Year with the BBC Philharmonic Orchestra.
Such a life as King.
Merciful God, keep us under the shadow of your mercy in this time of uncertainty and distress. Sustain and support the anxious and fearful. Lift up those who are brought low, and comfort all who grieve, that we may rejoice in your promise that nothing can separate us from your love in Jesus Christ, our Lord. Gracious God, we pray for all who suffer from the coronavirus and for all who care for them, for medical staff and researchers. Watch over all whose key work keeps our lives going, and help us never forget that our common life depends on each other's toil. Almighty God, who wonderfully created us in your own image, be our strength and deepen our need of you, that every breath may be a whisper of your Spirit. Stir up in us prayer for the world you created and sustain, and help us to be a blessing to those who stand in need of you, the whole fragile earth. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Our final hymn, O Lord of every shining constellation, draws out our prayer in this most holy week, to tread with grace the road to life offered to us by our Creator, God.
To
has one final invitation to you. If you would like to be part of the virtual congregation singing Thine Be the Glory as part of Sunday worship with the Archbishop of Canterbury on Easter Day, instructions for how to send a recording may be found on the Daily Service webpage. May God, who so loved the world that he gave his only Son, keep you steadfast as you walk with him the way of his cross. Amen.
BBC News at 10 o'clock. The Cabinet Office Minister Michael Gove has said Boris Johnson has received oxygen support while in intensive care in London. The Prime Minister was admitted to the unit at St Thomas's Hospital in London last night after his symptoms for coronavirus worsened. He isn't on a ventilator. Will Walden, who was Mr Johnson's Director of Communications, said his old boss was naturally fit and healthy.
He's a really, really strong guy. He's immensely fit, actually far fitter than he looks. He'll whip anybody's backside on a tennis court. He runs regularly. He doesn't smoke. He drinks moderately. So I think if anyone is in a good position, both physically and mentally, to fight off this disease, then the Prime Minister is that person.
The Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab has arrived at Downing Street to deputise for the Prime Minister where necessary. He said Mr Johnson was in very good hands. The former Deputy Prime Minister, Lord Heseltine, says this will be a testing time for the government.
There must come a time when a deputy is effectively Prime Minister. I don't think we've probably quite got to that now, but the present urgency of the situation and the potential decisions that may be needed to be taken quickly does mean that Dominic Raab will have to use his discretion and know when to act.
Experts have concluded that school closures do not have a significant impact on controlling the spread of coronavirus. The researchers from University College London said politicians should consider less disruptive measures, including closing playgrounds and increasing the space between pupils in classrooms. Number 10 said schools would reopen when scientific advice said it was safe to do so. Nearly 300 passengers have left the Philippines on a repatriation flight for London. The tickets, which have been part subsidised by the Foreign Office, have still cost Britons £1,000. From Manila, Howard Johnson reports.
Earlier today, 4 sweeper flights from islands identified by the British Embassy as having high numbers of stranded UK nationals arrived at Manila's main international airport for a connecting flight to the UK. Britons I spoke with said after weeks of uncertainty, they were relieved to be going home to see family and friends. The British Embassy said today that they will now look at ways of helping other stranded Britons in less accessible parts of the country.
In other news this morning, the most senior Catholic to be jailed for child sexual abuse has had his conviction overturned by Australia's highest court and been freed from jail. Cardinal George Pell, who was a treasurer in the Vatican, was found guilty of offences against 2 boys in 2018. But judges at the High Court said the original jury ought to have entertained a doubt as to the Cardinal's guilt. The cost of petrol is approaching £1 per litre across the UK for the first time since 2016. The main reason for the fall is because of a price war between Russia and Saudi Arabia. The AA said there was scope for further reductions at forecourts, particularly at supermarkets. BBC News.
Now on BBC Radio 4, it's time for Woman's Hour with Jane Garvey.
A very good morning to you. Hope you're okay this morning, and thank you very much for being there. We're very grateful to you. We're still here. On the programme today, we're going to hear from the great writer Linda LaPlante. She started a whole new series of books. She's got a new hero this time round, so we'll hear from Linda a little bit later on. And we'll also have another fantastic Woman's Hour coronavirus diary. This morning, you can hear from Elizabeth. She's very young. She's just 21. She was living her dream, and she's now back on the family farm in Cornwall, and life is very different, very, very different. You'll hear from her a little bit later. Let's start, though, in the company of Mary Berry and the dietitian Priya Chu. Good morning to you both. Great to have you on the programme today.
Good morning.
Hello, Mary.
Good morning.
And Priya, good morning to you as well. Priya in Southampton. Mary joins us from her relatively new home, actually. I think it's in Oxfordshire. That's right, isn't it, Mary?
That's right, yes, and the sun's shining.
Yes, it is actually. What we must hang on to the fact that it is a truly beautiful morning here, actually. I trust beautiful across much of the UK. So whatever else is going on, spring is still happening. Mary, tell us about your lockdown. How has it been for you?
I just feel immensely fortunate. We've got a garden, we've got dogs that we can walk. I'm so fortunate to have my husband. There's just the two of us, and we've got time to do all the things that I ought to do. I can ring old friends, have a bit of a chat. Some of them are on their own. You know, when you get to my age, you know a lot of widows. And I just feel very fortunate. I'm doing a lot of cooking, things that my husband and I enjoy most.
Well, that's brilliant.
Once a week.
Yeah, it's brilliant that you say that you're making contact with people, because I've got an email here from a listener called Vanessa. So good morning to you, Vanessa. I hope you're listening today. On the subject of loneliness, she says, I was widowed 20 years ago when I was just 55, and I felt very lonely and isolated at times, despite having lots of interests and keeping active. Suddenly, in the lockdown, I'm feeling less lonely. I've had calls from people I haven't heard from for years. They are now feeling the isolation. For me, that's a silver lining. So that is exactly what you're talking about, Mary.
Exactly, yes. And it's lovely to catch up and all sorts of memories to chat about and find out what they're doing. I mean, my own children, who I contact by phone, they're all cooking like mad. One of them's a couple of them going to university, and Sarah's giving them cooking lessons of things that they really like and will be able to do with few ingredients.
Yeah, okay, and that's the important thing, isn't it? Because some of us are struggling to get various things. What could you recommend in terms of basic stuff? What are the absolute essentials that you can't live without?
The essentials, I like to have a backup of tin goods and things in my freezer. I mean, obviously pastas, which have been short in the supermarkets, I believe.
Yeah.
But remember with pasta, you know, if you want to make lasagna, you could use any of the other pastas that you've got, cook them a bit first, and, you know, even penne in layers or tagliatelle in layers. So I would like pastas and rices and tin things. In my freezer, I've always got frozen peas, and you know, you may not get them on your next visit to the supermarket, but to have them on hand, I think, is great. And bread too. We're only two, so when I buy a big loaf, I put divide it into three and wrap some of it and put it in the freezer. So I've always got fresh bread. We mustn't have waste. We mustn't throw away.
No, not at the moment. I know, of course, you were only a child during World War II. We must remember that. But you have pretty clear memories of what your mum was able to do.
Yes. Now, Mum said to us, in those days, we didn't have coffee. Everybody in the household had tea, and she said, now, if you don't take sugar in your tea, I will be able to make cakes and the odd pud during the war. I mean, things were difficult because, you know, you grew everything yourself, and, you know, flower beds were turned into vegetable patches, and we made the most of vegetables, and we were lucky to be in the country and have chickens and things.
Let's bring in Priya. Priya, you have 3 kids. They are 3, 6 and 9. That's right, isn't it?
Yes, that's right.
Right, you're a dietitian. You're also a single parent. So that's the 3 kids and the single parent thing. That is not easy at the moment. Not easy any time.
It's been a huge adaptation to suddenly having them home and trying to work. And I also run a very busy Pilates studio as well. So it is full on at the minute.
Yeah, well, they're up and at it, as you'd expect, by almost 10:10 in the morning. What are you eating? What are you able to get?
So we have been able to get most things. Pasta has been a little bit short, as have frozen vegetables. So when I went recently, there were only Brussels sprouts left. Nobody wanted the Brussels sprouts, it would seem. The things that I have really struggled to get are the free-from foods. So I've got a lactose intolerant child, and I can't eat wheat myself. So gluten-free flour has not been around, and lactose-free milk as well.
That's odd, isn't it? Do you think people are buying in bulk or buying stuff because they mistake it for something else, or what? What's going on?
Well, I did go and I did a shop, and I saw quite a few people with lactose-free milk, and I thought, oh, there just must be more people that need this milk at the minute. But I think that people have been buying it up because it's long life. so therefore they're buying that instead of their usual milk, so they've got a stockpile.
Right.
And maybe it's the same with the flour.
Now, tell me about shopping, actually getting to the shop when you've got the kids and it's just you as the sole adult. Is that possible? Can you go into the shop with the kids?
I found it really hard because I don't want to take my children around the shop at the minute. They're going to be touching things and picking everything up and running around, creating chaos, which you can't really do with social distancing. So I've been relying more on the smaller local shops, and I've been leaving them outside or by the security guard. I'm finding that's the easiest thing to do.
Right. Mary, here's a question for you that I have to say I did not expect, but it's from Jackie, who says she's a reasonable cook and a keen gardener. Her question is, can you eat ground elder?
As far as I know, I wouldn't.
Right.
I would have to ask the RHS. The answer is I don't know.
No, I know.
It's not one of the things that I've been noted you eat of wild food like nettles. I've got a friend who's making nettle soup from young nettles at the moment.
Nettle soup, is that actually a tasty soup, nettle soup?
It can be, but you've got to use very young nettles.
Right, let that be a lesson to all of us. Here is Anna on email. Hearing that Mary Berry was on today, I want to tell her that in each of my pregnancies, I have read her autobiography. There we are. I don't know what that tells you.
I hope it cheers her up.
It must be a hormonal thing, yeah. As soon as we went into lockdown, says Anna, and pasta somehow disappeared from the shelves, I was reminded of Mary's description of her mother's ingenious cooking during the days of rationing. So there you go, there's a nod to your mum again. Actually, you mentioned lasagna and using other forms of pasta in lasagna. What you can also do, Priya, presumably, is tear up lasagna and stick it in a pasta sauce and pretend it's bigger and chunkier than it actually is.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Or the other idea would be look for rice noodles, look for different types of pasta that you wouldn't normally try and give those a go.
And what about the food parcels that the government is supplying to, we think at the moment, approximately 50,000 people? What do you know about them, Priya?
I think they sound like a really good idea for those people who are having to self-isolate for a long time and can't get to the shops. So I've got a friend locally who received one and he put the picture on Facebook. So I contacted him and asked exactly what was in it, and he told me that he had got tins of peas, chopped tomatoes, he had some pasta and baked beans, tuna, bolognese sauce, some tomato soup and some ready break, some potatoes, bread, long life milk and some apples.
Right, you're right. I think the parcels do differ depending on whereabouts in the country you are. Just as a dietitian, what do you think of that?
What do I think about the parcels?
Yeah.
What do I think about them bearing? I think the parcels are a really good idea if they contain ingredients that you can make some meals from.
Is that parcel good enough?
Yes, that parcel, you could certainly use your tinned tomatoes and your tuna to make a pasta dish. You've got your baked beans on toast that you could easily make. There's bolognese sauce and pasta, and there's vegetables in there as well. So I think that parcel sounded really good.
Yeah, Mary, the simple way to make a tomato sauce, can you remind us? I mean, if you've got a tin of tomatoes, what can you do?
Funnily enough, I was making a basic tomato sauce yesterday. First of all, I start off with an onion, and I just cut it up roughly, and then I cook it down in very, very low heat in a little bit of oil or butter until that's absolutely tender. I then would add some garlic, then I'd add the canned tomatoes, and if I've got tomato puree or sun-dried tomato paste, I put that in. And if I've got a drop of wine, I'll drop that in as well. But it's unlikely the wine's left over.
Yeah, well, you said it, Mary. Can I ask something about snacking? Because this is a question that's come in from our listeners, and I confess that we're all anxious. This is a stressful time, and many of us are closer to our fridge for more of the day than we're used to. And I'm afraid that means that we're making increasing visits. So, Priya, what do you say about that? What is the healthy snack?
If you can get in some nuts and some dried fruit and have those to hand, but do let yourself have things that you really fancy. So we need to be allowing ourselves to have bits of cake or chocolate bars or whatever it might be to satisfy that craving. So it's okay to have those foods, but try and balance them up. So I say to my children when they ask for sweets, certainly have the sweet thing, but, you know, have some fruit, have some nuts to go alongside it, and then we close the kitchen. So we put our snack on a plate, we go away and we eat it, and then that's it, snack time is finished.
Do you recognise what I said about myself, that perhaps stress is making you choose differently when it comes to the old nibble? Yes. Yes,
definitely. I think stress, for some people it makes them want to eat less, and for other people it certainly makes them want to eat more, and it can be those sweeter foods or more carbohydrate foods because they're satisfying. And it's okay to therefore be eating some of those, but obviously we want to be mindful that we're not continually going back for snack after snack.
And I don't want to give a sort of picture of our listeners as being terrifically happy with this state of affairs at the moment, because it isn't true. This is an email from a listener. I'll keep her anonymous, but she says, I've just slowly become rather low. I've got no motivation or energy. I'm sleeping a lot. I think I'm actually suffering because I'm an extrovert. And my friends that aren't are enjoying self-isolation rather more than me. There is no doubt about it, Mary, and you acknowledge it yourself. This is a tough time for many, isn't it?
I think it's a very tough time, and particularly people who are alone or perhaps a single parent with several children in a confined space. It's a matter of planning the day, isn't it? And you know, young children can draw, they can do jigsaw puzzles, but all the time, what's next? It must be very, very difficult indeed. And I think getting to do cooking with them is good, and also giving them jobs. Like my daughter has 3 children, and they're all under 15, and they do breakfast, lunch and supper in the evening. They have to lay the table and actually clear it away to put it in the dishwasher on their own, not in, and so they take quite a pride of it. And the little girl went out and picked some primroses and put in the middle of the table. You know, it's giving them tasks to do and make them proud to do it.
Yes, and anything that breaks the back of the day and gets you through to tea time is a good way of proceeding, isn't it? You won't be surprised to hear that Ground Elder has kicked off the Radio 4 audience, and there's a variety of views. Hannah says you can eat it in salad as a bitter leaf or cooked like spinach if you can face picking enough of it. Ree says
the power of woman's art to get all that in so quickly.
It's astonishing.
Yes, it would be a bit like sorrel, I should think.
Possibly. Ree says it was introduced to these islands by monks who grew it in their monastery kitchen gardens, from where it escaped to become the bane of some gardeners. It has a faint but celery-like flavour. Eat raw or simmer slowly. You're right, Mary. We have the best audience of all out there.
Well, I'm very, very impressed.
Now, lockdown cake. You mentioned delighting small children. Here's a good way. If you've got the ingredients, make a cake, for heaven's sake. And you have a recipe for us for a good old sponge.
Yes, well, I mean, I would just make the basic Victoria sandwich, because you get a bit stressful when you've got to make a birthday cake, and so if you do a recipe that you know, and I use a baking spread and I put everything in the bowl together. In my mother's day it would be the weight of the eggs in butter, sugar and flour, and then you just beat it all together and put it in 2 tins. It'll cook better. Make sure you use the right size tin for the amount of mixture, and then you can sandwich it together with what you've got. It could be buttercream or cream or just jam, and then make some icing, butter icing if you've got no if you've got no icing sugar, you could do it with caster sugar, and then a water icing on top, what is made with lemon juice and icing sugar. And the decoration, have you got some sparklers left? A few candles. If you haven't got anything to pipe it with, you can always decorate it with sweets, little tiny sweets in the name of the person. It's the thought that counts, and if it's a young person having a birthday, do let them do it with you.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you so much, Mary. That recipe is on the Woman's Hour website, by the way.